this person who was doing the harassing kept doing things like sitting on her lap and making weird little comments to her. And it culminated in what had happened that morning, where the harasser took the harassee into an empty office and showed her a recently obtained piercing that involved her removing her pants.
All right, Alex. So we were talking to one of our buddies who's, I feel like, been on our podcast more than a few times. So that doesn't really narrow it down, because I feel like we bring like the same like 4 friends on all the time anyways. There's so many third wheels on this podcast.
I guess so.
And he was telling us a funny story about how one day he was just walking down the hall, getting ready to go use the potty, and open the door, and it was not locked, and one of his male assistants was standing there full trousers down going pee, so he got to see his butt staring right at him, and then said it was really funny and awkward. And so when I heard that, I was like, oh, that'd be interesting. I want to bring that up to our guest today, Kara Kelley, who a lot of you guys have seen. You know, she posts all the time on Facebook. That's not saying it's like a bad thing. I appreciate it. You teach us a lot of stuff. So that's not me telling you to stay off social media. We appreciate it. But no, I wanted to ask her situations like that, what do you do? And then talk about just other either ridiculous or kind of funny HR situations, and like actually how you handle stuff, because I feel like a lot of us in your career, you're gonna it's like getting a bad review. Like, you're eventually gonna have an HR issue. It's just a matter of when. And I think if you know how to handle it, or at least know how to get in contact with the right person to help you handle it, that kind of helps. And then hopefully if it's an HR issue, it's more of a silly or funny one, like our buddy went through. But thanks for coming on, Kara.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here. And I love that story. That's not the first time I've heard something like that happen.
So how do you handle it?
I mean, in that particular situation, accidents happen. We're all human. Probably should have locked the door. As HR, we look at it from a broader perspective of, is there been a pattern of accidents? Is it something that like
a pattern? He just like
well,
Jimmy's the door like, all the time.
Yeah, it's like the guy. It's like the guy who's always trying to like. You know, one of my buddies showed me on his Ring camera how there's this one guy that like walks up on their street and is always checking the doors to see if the car is open or not. It's like, is this dentist just constantly always checking the door handle to see if it's open?
No, I mean, like, has there been a pattern? Has this person been flirting with the person they walked in on? Or is the person who they walked in on constantly leaving the door unlocked by accident and everyone's walking in on them? So we kind of have to see, first of all, when we're looking at like sexual harassment or any kind of misconduct there, is this something that has been unwanted and pervasive? Is it something that's continuing, right? If this is a one-off accident, it's embarrassing and somebody might be offended by it, but it doesn't usually escalate to that level unless there was some level of intent, or if there was a pattern of things that have been going on like this. And I can give you an example of something where there was a pattern of it. It was actually my very first sexual harassment issue that I had to deal with. I had an office manager that I had worked with to do their handbook a couple of months prior. She called me one morning and she's like, hey, you need to give me a call back. I've got something and you're going to love it. And I'm like, ooh, I am intrigued. So I returned the call and she's telling me, so she's the office manager of an all-female team with a male doctor, but she's had a team member who had been kind of, I would say, flirting with another one of the team members. The one who had been the harassee, the one being harassed, had been pregnant previously, had a baby recently, and so she wasn't feeling great. But this person who was doing the harassing kept doing things like sitting on her lap and making weird little comments to her. And it culminated in what had happened that morning, where the harasser took the harassee into an empty office and showed her a recently obtained piercing that involved her removing her pants.
Oh, wow.
So things like that are clearly intentional. It's clearly misconduct. And so the employee who was being harassed didn't really know what to do. She told other team members. The team members told the office manager called me. They were just going to let her go and say, oh, well, it just isn't working out. And I'm like, no, we just did your handbook a couple of months ago. We've got policy in place for this. You're going to terminate her for misconduct because that's what this is at this point. And so you don't want somebody being able to, file for unemployment or file a suit afterward. You want to actually fire them for the thing that they did, which in this case case was misconduct. Now, on the off chance that all the team members were making this up because they hate the girl and wanted to get her fired, that would be one thing. But that wasn't the case here. The investigation, if you want to call it that, took all of 10 seconds, where the doctor asked her, do you know why you're here? Why I called you into my office? And she said, of course, yes, everything spilled out. She got fired. And that was almost the end of it. The end of it was a couple days later when the person who got fired's mom emails the office manager because she's HR at some other company. And her daughter apparently didn't tell her the reason she had been fired. And so she was trying to claim wrongful termination. Good times. Things like that, though, those are clearly a different level. It's something that had been happening that she had been asked to stop. And it's something that culminated into a very clearly intentional event versus, oops, I accidentally walked in on you in the bathroom.
Yeah, but I think you can make an argument that in that situation I brought up, maybe it was wanted because supposedly he had dropped trow just like my 4-year-old does when he goes pee at a urinal. So for listeners, right, most adult men usually don't pull their whole pants down when they go pee in a urinal. Maybe if they're just feeling lazy, they feel like no one's going to. But then that probably means you didn't think anyone was going to walk in on you. So then you're probably, yeah. So maybe it was unwanted and he just forgot to walk in.
I'm not going to judge what people do in the bathroom. But like I said, if that's a pattern of, if they have constantly been leaving the door unlocked and getting walked in on or something.
Oops.
Yeah. Oops, not again. Yeah.
Or if they had told this person, hey, meet me in the bathroom. Like, we need to look at the bigger picture.
Yeah.
Oh, gosh, yeah.
Yeah, we actually have like, in ours, because of how our office had to be set up, our compressor and everything is actually like a hid.
It's like a closet.
It's a closet within the bathroom. So the only way to get, and I don't know if you've seen that in some offices where, it's never created an issue where someone was like, hey, the compressor's down. I got to run in through the bathroom, right? I mean, people I think in our office are pretty good at locking the door. But that's something I just even thought of now. Like that is a like structural issue or a flow issue of how our office is where like that just had to be built into that part. So like you kind of have to go through there to get there. Which is things you don't think about, right? When you're designing an office, the contractor is just like, this is where this has to go. This is the only space left. And you're like, okay, that's fine, right?
Yeah, you got to think about it functionally. One of the ones I see that they don't think about often is where to put a washer and dryer and where somebody might need to take like a lactation break, for example. And the number of offices, like we'll be going through a handbook and looking at policies and we get to the lactation break section and I say, okay, where can a team member pump if they needed to in your office? And they're like, I don't know, the break room, I guess, but it's still kind of open. Maybe the front office, but it's got a window in it. The doctor's office is the only one. I'm like, it needs to lock. It needs to not be a bathroom in most cases. Like, you really need to try like this much harder. It could be a large storage room if it needs to be. There's just so many that they're like, I have no idea. I didn't think about that because they don't.
I mean, a lot of us have sliding doors too, right? We don't have a lot of doors that lock, right? It's just bathrooms mainly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so, I mean, in that case, finding something that you can make it secure if possible, if there's some way to put like a stopper or something on it where somebody can utilize that space. It can be done, but it's not always something that's considered at the time of build.
No, it isn't. And I mean, it is more common, right? Like dental, even there's more females graduating and it is more female driven in terms of employees. Like, I mean, we always had a running joke. Like, I feel like at our office, there's always someone that's pregnant, like at least one person. And so, which is awesome. That's great. They're starting families. But like, yeah, that is a common thing that I'm sure happens in dental, probably more so than potentially even other fields, right? That we don't think about.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Especially on the clinical side, it's something like 90% of team members on the clinical side are going to be female most years from what I've seen. And I know that's starting to shift a little bit, but it's still a pretty prevalent concern or things that we need to be aware of. And when we're looking at how to design our space, we're looking at efficiency and how much production can I get out of this, right? Yeah. How little room can I leave for a break room? How little room can I leave for reception? They don't necessarily think about things like somebody might need to take a pumping break.
Yeah. Especially like a male, right? Like as like a male doctor, it's just something that wouldn't go through my head, right? You don't think about that stuff.
It kind of depends. I've had some male doctors that are actually some of the most empathetic, some of the most generous for their team. Sometimes it's because they've got a spouse and they've got kids. Sometimes it's because they were raised with women. I don't know not to stereotype anybody here, but I've heard recently the stereotype that women are always more empathetic as leaders than men. I'm like, I don't know that I've found that to be true, quite honestly. I found quite a few male dentists, male practice owners who treat their team like amazing.
Yeah,
I'd love to work for them.
Maybe it's just more of like the oblivious thing. I feel like as guys, I feel like we just might be more like that.
Maybe.
But no, okay. So when you were saying this earlier, and I wanted to get your thought on this before I tell you like this other crazy story that I had heard happen, was when you were saying, hey, with the situation with the female right at the office, and at first they were like, hey, well, we'll just let this person go, right? Part of what goes through my head is like, when if you have someone that steals, right, money, or you have someone that does something like that, it's like the work involved, right? And you're like, I just don't want to go through all this. I'm trying to run a practice. Tomorrow is a super productive day. Like, I already am stressing about that. Now I have to deal with this. And so, like, I think the laziness in us is just like, can I just let this person go, and then we can just like, we both agree that it's okay and we're just done, right? Like, that's, I wonder if, do a lot of other dentists think that way? Because that's kind of where my head goes if something like that were to happen.
Yes, and a lot of times it's not laziness, it's they're just afraid of confrontation, or they just don't want to have that conversation.
I mean, that's a tough conversation.
It is. Well, yes. Would you want to go to your female team member and be like, so did you take your pants off in front of this other girl?
Yeah. I mean, it's probably tough too for like, if you have some dentists too that either maybe they're very traditional in values, right? Or they have like that is probably hard. They're probably not comfortable saying like either the words or the phrases that have to come out for that. That would probably be tough. I don't know, Alex. Can you deal with it? You don't mind. Do you like no? You don't.
No,
like
I don't like confrontation. No, I just try to take the emotion out of it. Like, this is not a personal thing. It's just it is what it is. I don't know. It's like a Band-Aid. Just pull it off.
Hey, that's how I have to handle it. I'm a third party. I have no business in this. This is your circus, your monkeys. I don't have to get involved. I don't have to work with these people. I don't have to see them on Monday morning. So I'm able to take that emotion out of it, and it makes me very impartial, unbiased third party when I have those conversations, because I do sometimes have to conduct the internal investigations or work with somebody who is doing a disciplinary conversation or even terminating someone. And yes, I definitely agree with that.
Okay, so this next story, this one was kind of interesting.
What's happened now?
Which one? Oh, this was like when we were in the military.
Oh, okay.
So one of the other doctors that I worked with, so he was a private practice dentist before. He's a prosthodontist in like somewhere, I think, in LA County. And then he like semi-retired and he had joined the military. And so we were stationed in the same spot. So he was like the old guy and we were all like the new grads, right? And he had a successful practice prior. So we'd always ask him questions, right? About like, how'd you do this? When we get out, we wanted to blah, blah, blah. And so he had told us there was one sticky situation he had gotten to, and because he was a prosthodontist and he placed implants, he put a lot of patients under sedation, right? And so he was doing a sedation case on a patient, I think probably placing an implant at that point, and following all the procedures and protocols. He had an assistant in the room with him, and when the patient woke up, I guess once she had gotten home, she had called back. And this part I might be butchering a little bit, but the point is she had let this doctor know that she was unhappy that he tried fondling her or touching her breasts. And he was like, what the hell? I did not do that. And one of the side effects of those medications you're on is you can almost like, it's not really like hallucinate, but you can remember things that didn't happen, right? On some of those meds. Mm-hmm. And she thought, like, she was convinced that it happened. Luckily for him, I believe he got a knock one day on his door, and it was someone in the government. I don't know. I don't know. You would know this, like what regulatory agency or whatever it is that had to do an investigation and talk with him about it. And thank God he said he had an assistant in the room the whole time that could like corroborate his story, right, and say what it was. And he ended up not getting in trouble for it. But like, that's something you don't plan for, right? You don't even think of that happening. And then it's like, then you wonder, did that actually happen to that person, right? Or are they trying to scam? Are they scammers, right? Do they have a history of trying to do this because they're like, hey, I could get a lot of money out of this dentist. I can make this up. I know these medications do this, but if he doesn't have this, I might as well just try. So that was his story.
Oh, yes. And that's another, it's crazy. But like you said, having a witness, I think in a lot of these situations, whether it's working with an employee who you're having a disciplinary issue, or whether there's a patient that has a complaint, if you can have witnesses and people who will actually write a witness statement, that can be really beneficial for you. Because keep in mind too that a lot of these, just like with patient notes, you're not going to necessarily need it in the moment, but you're going to need it, 3-5 years later when it has to get read to a jury, and your witness may not work for you anymore. They may not remember what happened at that point. And so if there's anything that happens that's something like that, I would automatically have that employee write out a witness statement of, hey, this patient called in and this is what they're claiming before anybody gets there. This is what they're claiming. You were there the whole time. Can we write out a statement that, is very factual? That is, here are the times the patient was in the office. This is the time that I was there, time you were there, that nothing was seen or done. Let's go ahead and just get this on paper just in case something comes of this. Very, very valuable statement to have later on if there is, because she might not have called immediately. It may have been 3 months later where she might have felt embarrassed about it and told a friend, and a friend said you should sue the doctor, and so a couple months later you're getting that call, and then that employee may or may not work for you, and all of those things that could happen down the line. So getting those things in the moment is very, very useful, I think, from a documentation standpoint.
Yeah, and that's why I only give local anesthetic and only do like fillings, so I don't have to do
No, but one thing you do is whenever you do have to like fire someone, and I know this has kind of shifted in like the last couple years.
This is exactly what I was thinking. I asked.
Is that you're like, I need like the office manager, whoever in the room.
How does this work? Because we all hear about it, right? And it's like when you're getting rid of someone, you need someone in the other room. Does it have to be the person of a different gender than you? Can it be the same gender? Does it matter anymore? Like, can you kind of clarify that? Because I feel like there's a lot of like, no one really knows what the right protocol is. And the situation is you've got to fire someone.
I don't know that the gender matters so much. Sometimes the relationship may matter. And so like if your spouse is the office manager and that's the only person that you have that's really a strong witness, that may or may not be the best, kind of situation dependent and who picks it up. So if you have an office manager, I don't know that it's relevant on the gender per se, but yeah, if you've got an office manager and you've got to let a team member go, having that office manager there is a good idea.
Or just at least one other person, right? Like you just need someone. Okay.
Yeah, one other.
Doesn't matter.
No, I don't know that it matters necessarily what gender or any really demographics of it, but you do need a witness. The demographics that I do look at, though, depending on your team's makeup, is this being somebody who is either above the person being terminated or is, lateral to that person. So I wouldn't necessarily have an assistant be present for a hygienist's termination, just because looking at power dynamics and things like that.
That doesn't make sense.
Yeah, and you don't want them to go back to the rest of the assisting team and go, talk about things like that particular situation. And so you want it to be somebody who's trustworthy, somebody who will make a good, credible witness if there ever needs to be. If you can, because
who's your enforcer, right? Who's the
your compliance officer?
The muscle.
Yeah,
yeah, but probably not. I mean, yeah, I would never have anytime I had to fire anyone, it was just like me in my office with that person, and it's like it kind of can get back to like what he said, she said, kind of thing, and it's like, luckily I never had to really deal with that, but you do a good job of like having a witness kind of in there. But there was something. Now I'm trying to remember. I remember there was an issue, and maybe you'll remember this, but I remember there was something happened, and I was like, everyone needs to write down exactly what happened right now, like so that everyone remembers. You don't remember that? That was. I don't think it was like. I can't remember if it was.
Well, I obviously didn't write it down if I was there.
You weren't there. No, you weren't there. But I do remember, and I'm trying to remember if it was with a patient or with a staff member in a termination or something like that. And it was like, everyone just write it down.
You didn't have too many I think out of the two of us, I was the
I didn't have too many crazies.
I was the only one that had kind of it was the first person I had to fire, right, at my office. And I feel like, you're a newer dentist. You don't know what the hell you're doing. You're trying to do the best you can. But in this situation, we had someone who was working up at the front, and it just wasn't working out, right? And so I wanted to at first do what I felt like was the right thing at the time. And I was like, I should bring that person in, 10 minutes before in the beginning of the day, as opposed to, because I think I heard or read it on, maybe it was you that posted it on Facebook, Kara, but someone had said like, do it in the morning, don't do it at the end of the day, right? Because then it kind of like affects your whole day, and then you're ruminating about it, but maybe not. So anyways, I decided I was going to do it in the beginning of the day before we had patients. Well, that tipped her off a little bit, right? Because it's like, why is he having me come in early? And I just sent her a text that just said, hey, got to review a couple things, which probably also tipped her off too, because I wouldn't normally text her that. And so she came in, right? I had someone else in the office too, who was kind of our office manager. And just told her like, hey, and me being like the first time on it, I don't think I was very confident in like, hey, I appreciate you being here. Unfortunately, it's not working out for us here. I wish you the best. Today's your last day. We'll get you your paycheck, by here, and have a nice life, whatever. I was much more like wishy-washy on it, right? Or like not confident. And so anyone listening, even if you aren't confident or nervous going into it, make sure that you like pretend like you're confident, because that got called out right away. I got called like a pussy. I got called like to my face, like, you're so wishy-washy, blah, 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 like all that kind of stuff. And I was like, okay, she's getting angry now. Thank God I did this before we had patients in. So then she went to clear out her desk and like slammed stuff on, like she slammed the keyboard down, she slammed the mouse down, grabbed stuff out. Luckily the office manager was right there and could see everything that was going on. Then she walks out and is just like walks out with like, fuck you guys, and just leaves, right? And I was like, oh God. And then a patient walks in like 2 minutes later, and I was like, okay. Our office manager was like, yeah, no one really wanted her here anyways, like no one's angry about this, right? And so I didn't realize she like was still fuming outside. And like 5 minutes later, when we had someone checking in and that person that was our office manager was checking that patient in, she walks back in, looks at the office manager right in the face, and is like, yeah, and one last thing, you're like a backstabbing bitch, and like in front of the patient trying to check in. And I'm like, oh my God, this is awful. I'm never firing anyone again. And so then she walks out and leaves, right? And after that, and then I had to go up and apologize to the patient and just kind of tell him. The patient luckily was like very cool. He's like, dude, I get it. It happens. And then I had to talk to the office manager about like, not everyone else has those same feelings, right, about you as she appears to have had, right? I think she was just frustrated. But I remember telling her, like, we need to remember this because this is kind of important, right, to know, because I was like, I don't know what she's going to do next. Well, fast forward like 2 hours and I get a text with her like apologizing profusely, right? Because I think she realized that she was in the wrong and she probably was going to try to go look for another job. And when she had to go put in her references, like, I'm not going to go through and tell the whole story, but I would probably say not rehireable, right? And just leave it at that. And so I could tell really soon after it was like super apologetic. Then I think she even asked for her job back. And I was like, that's not going to happen. But that was like my first experience firing someone. And I was like, like,
yeah,
part of you get that fight or flight thing where you're like, oh yeah, let's, like, she wants to go, like, this could be fun. And then you're like, no, but you kind of have to like tone it down, right? And so like I stayed professional during all of it, right? I didn't like get too amped up with it, like outwardly. But yeah, that was my first firing experience. If you like our podcast, check out Alex's newsletter, Just 2 Minutes. It's full of great advice, which makes sense considering it's her thoughts and not me sidetracking her every 2 seconds. You can subscribe at coupleofdentists.com. The link is in the show notes. Now, back to the pod. Hopefully,
oh man, lots to unpack
there. Yeah.
So first of all, there is no perfect time to hire. Some people recommend in the morning, but as you see, that can be its own little level of problem. Sometimes they'll recommend at the end of the day because then your workflow is done and then they can just go home. There's not really a perfect time. I would say that there's some times not to. When patients are in the office, it'd be an obvious one. I've had to unfortunately conduct things like January 2nd terminations, which is not fun for anyone. I worked for a boss that had it was fun anyway. Yeah. But I was HR. That's what I had to do. I'm advocating for the business, and so sometimes I had to be part of terminations that I didn't agree with. I wouldn't do it before a weekend personally, because then, especially if they maybe have a mental health issue or something you're not aware of, they've got all weekend to go home and think about that. And sometimes things will happen over the weekend and you'll find out on Monday morning that maybe they have unalived themselves or something really, really negative. And so I would maybe not do it before a weekend. I would do it when mental health professionals' offices are opened in the event that it is needed. Just as a thought. There's questions about like whether or not to terminate somebody before a holiday. I'm actually a fan of if it's a couple weeks in advance of like Christmas, for example, to go ahead and let them know before they've made it through the holiday season and racked up their credit card debt with the expectation that they've got a job to help pay it off. And then all of a sudden they don't because you fired them right after the holiday. I would just say, just go ahead and let them go. Quite honestly, fourth quarter is a difficult time to hire anyways, because a lot of team members are holding on for that end of year bonus and holiday pay. And so it may be easier for them to job search during that period of time. So really no perfect time, but I would maybe at least think about the negatives on some of those cases. As far as like leading the conversation and making sure you're staying on topic and not getting emotional about it, I always recommend having a termination letter that you have in front of you that you've pre-thought out, if possible. Obviously, if they've done something egregious like assault someone, then no, we're not going to sit down and write a letter about it, but you can follow up with one later. But if you're doing something like this, have a letter in front of you so that you can follow that conversation, and then they have that documentation of, this is what we talked about today. This is why we're letting you go. So that way it gets less emotional in some cases. And then, of course, if you do have somebody who might have a violent reaction that you're concerned about, you can generally call your local PD or county sheriff if you're in that jurisdiction and have somebody come be an escort. If you feel like this person is going to be violent or destructive of property or do something, like, for example, I would not have allowed her up at the front desk slamming things by herself at all. I would have actually been there with her. And if she
I was
Okay.
there as a clarification. I was standing there, which makes it more awkward, but like that's always the awkward part, right? Because the relationship goes from like, I trust you. You can walk freely versus like now you're a prisoner until you leave this, right? Like it kind of like the mindset changes because like now the relationship has changed and they're not employed anymore, and you kind of have to become like a guard and you're almost watching them because now you don't know. So that's always fun and awkward to deal with.
Yeah. And that's where having the witness there, the witness could be the person that does that, depending on the situation and the dynamics there. But I don't know that I would have allowed her continue to do that. I would have maybe at some point said, okay, if you cannot do this without destruction of property or without damaging our property, then I will just ship your things to you. Please leave. You can have them leave your building and you can send their things via courier or ship it or whatever after the fact, if need be, if they're going to be somehow physically violent or detrimental to your practice in any way.
Yeah. That's fair.
I would also make sure your IT person is disconnecting their access to everything during the meeting. Sometimes it's a tip off if it's done before. You got to do what you got to do, but if it's done before, they might know that it's coming. But if you have somebody like say, hey, we're starting this meeting at 8 o'clock, by 8:10, could you go ahead and get started with disconnecting their access to where they can't access anything if they had access at all?
Well, yeah. A lot of people have remote access now, right?
That's what I was gonna say.
So like, I think I think you have to be very careful on who you should have a small circle in general of who you're giving remote access to, right? Like I couldn't see a point of like an assistant having remote access, right? Like that, I don't feel like there would be a lot of value for that. And all it could do is kind of, cause an issue, right? So, but yeah, I mean, we've had to in other times too. It was never anything egregious, but like if someone's leaving and then a lot of times people are like, hey, I forgot this, this, and this. And it's like, okay, just, what days are you available to have someone come pick it up? And usually they don't want to pick it up. It's a husband, it's a boyfriend or a girlfriend, right? That just swings by and gets it. And that makes it, I think, a little bit easier, right?
Yep. Just make sure they're authorized to be the person to pick that up.
Yeah, geez, I know.
Because what if it's like an ex-spouse that you didn't realize that they were going through something and they found out they got fired and walk in and say, hey, I'm here to pick up their final paycheck or whatever belongings they left or something like that. You never really know. So I would always be very careful of that. At the very least, get some kind of a written, this is the person who is going to be picking this information or these belongings or paycheck or whatever it is up. That'd be the other thing I would look at from the compliance side is making sure that you're following whatever your state requires for terminations, because some require paycheck day of, some require within 6 days, some on the next regularly scheduled paycheck. Some require you to provide a notice for unemployment that has your information on it. So I would be very careful about like what your state specifically requiring. I know you're in Facebook groups, as many as I am at least, and see a lot of that question of like, what do I need to do if somebody needs to be terminated? What steps do I take? And I see very few people that are saying, make sure you check with your state to provide this particular notice. And some states do require it, and they require it at the time of termination, not, a month later.
Yeah, this is why I think, as you were just talking about that, I feel like there's certain things in dentistry, whether you're just have a single practice or you've got like 100 group DSO, that you probably should outsource or have, like IT, right? Because like we got hacked like 6 months into my startup. Like if I didn't have an IT company, well, the IT company is the one who got hacked, but if you had an IT company that didn't get hacked, right? Like you kind of need that because like dentists don't know how to deal with like x-rays going down, open dental going down, dealing anything like that. I think the other thing that we probably should maybe have a working knowledge of, but should never be the expert in is like HR. I think there's more important things you can focus your time on. And I think there's very big consequences for not following things the right way. It would be like an attorney, right? Like trying to pretend to be your own lawyer, right? Like, because we had used one of the bigger HR companies, right? That was pretty popular, and we just paid, I think a subscription fee, and they, you can call them whenever, right? And they'll handle it, which was nice. I feel like that was one thing. It's like insurance. You don't feel like you need it until you need it, and I'm glad we had it because at least then, like, put it this way: if something bad happens, at least if I feel like a judge or something went to court and they were like, well, did you at least have an HR company? And you're like, yes, I was paying an HR company to handle this. It probably looks better, right? Because you were trying to be compliant. So I would say on those, like, that's one thing, like, just bite the bullet and just pay for it, right? Or just have someone who can at least be an advocate for you.
Yes,
that's my plug for you, Kara. Is why like people like that are important. People in your industry
don't do it yourself for HR.
There's also different levels of that. So I 100% agree with you with the DIY. The number of doctors that I talk to that say I did my handbook because I got a template from somebody, the DSO they worked for, the association, the dental association in their state, or a friend on Facebook. I got this template that I started with, and I spent 80 hours researching all of these laws and putting everything in there. And I'm like, but you don't know what you don't know. And you're missing half the things you should have. And the things you do have, you decided to make some changes to, and now they're not compliant. Definitely things like that, I feel should be done by an expert, because just like with dentistry or anything else, you spent 10 years learning how to be proficient at what you do, and you can do it very well and very quickly. In most cases, hopefully, right? Hopefully you can do it very well and very quickly and efficiently. I've had a client that I worked with last year or two that said they had their office manager put together their employee handbook. She spent 2 weeks, 80 hours of her time, and still didn't finish it. What she did finish was not great. And so I'm like, you could have literally paid me a fraction of what you paid your office manager to do it, and I would have had it done and done right. And so, yes, there's definitely what is the best use of your time? And it's probably not researching a ton of employment laws that you don't even know what you're looking for in some cases. That said, that there are certain things that your HR company shouldn't necessarily be handling, because you really do need to elevate that to your attorney. And I don't mean like your real estate attorney or the person who drafted a certain contract. It's somebody who actually litigates, a management side employment attorney who's familiar with your state and who litigates, because I see a lot of those types of situations where they didn't really seek the right advice. And I will, even if I've got somebody who's coming to me for something like disability accommodation, for example, I'll say, here's my HR perspective on it. And I am not an attorney and I do not give legal advice. You should reach out to your attorney and your representative to really get a yes or no on this situation, because sometimes it really does need that next level, and we shouldn't just cheap out and say, well, I pay a subscription to an HR company, I don't need to talk to an attorney over it. No, some things really, really do.
We all know Eric wants more friends. If you're enjoying this episode, share the podcast and then tell them to DM Eric so he can hit his quota of 1 new friend per day. Now back to the episode.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I'm trying to think of any other good stories. We haven't had anything else too crazy. Oh, here's another one I heard. And this is like, like when you hear like urban legends, this is an urban legend one. So maybe you've heard the same one, but in a different version, right?
Okay.
There was a dentist, and I'm going to assume my version of the story is this took place in an office building. So it was like a Saturday afternoon, and the dentist had, his emergency line, and a patient had called and said, hey, I'm having a toothache. Right? Can you come in and see me? It's really bothering me. And, the dentist is like, yeah, I'll come in. Right? So he drives into the office. He had called his assistant to come in just to help out with the procedure. And so he gets into the office first. He's the first one in there. And then the patient comes in and he's like, oh, hey, I'm sorry you're in pain. She's like, yeah, it's my, my top left tooth has been killing me. And he's like, okay, well, we'll be in this room back here. Let me finish getting set up. And so he starts setting up the room, and the patient's like, hey, I just need to use the restroom beforehand. So he's like, okay. She knows where the restroom is because she's a patient of record. So she walks into the restroom, right? And while she's in there for a little bit, the assistant walks in to the office, and she starts helping out the dentist set up. Well, the patient walks out of the bathroom, except none of her clothes are on. She's completely naked, right? And this was a ploy for her to try to come on to the male dentist. And she didn't realize that the assistant had been there in time. So luckily for him, there was someone else that was there that got to see that this patient was like that. But she was trying to come on to the dentist and that was her way of being forward and saying, I want to be with you. And I remember that, like, if that assistant hadn't come in right in between that time, that dentist probably would have been screwed, right, Kara? Like, that would have been a he said, she said thing. And it's easy for her to say, he's come on to me before. I thought this was what was supposed to happen. And what are you supposed to say if you're like, I don't know what you would do in that situation. So luckily for him, there was an assistant there and it was fine and there weren't any issues. But like I said, I don't know if this is a true story or not. This is somewhat maybe of an urban legend, but I don't know if anyone else has heard that one.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, I hadn't heard that one specifically either. Definitely glad the assistant was there. I would be dismissing that patient personally pretty immediately within whatever your law allows you to within your state as far as patient dismissals. If you had been by yourself and something like that happened, depending on whether you're in a 1 or 2 party state, I might have gone ahead and turned on a audio only recorder. I'm not saying go video somebody who is nude in front of you. But I would turn on at least an audio recorder if you can, if you're in a 1 party state where the other party doesn't have to necessarily consent to it. That's easier. If you're in a 2 party state, you have to at least make them aware that you are recording. So at that point, I might have stopped, paused, turned it on and said, I'm recording this for my safety at this point. I'm going to ask you to put your clothes back on and please exit my premises. You'll be receiving your patient dismissal letter forthwith. But that's, I personally haven't heard of that one, which is kind of surprising, I guess, at this point. I hear a lot of those stories. I'll be very curious if anybody listening has actually heard of this or if it was you. And if so, please email me at kara@clinicalhr.com. I would love to know.
I don't think this was like a random dream. I'm pretty sure I was told this when I was back in the military. No, but
I'm sure it happens more probably with staff members and stuff like that coming on to another staff member or the dentist.
I have had it happen with staff members. Yes, a couple of times at this point. Yeah. One of them, he was just the sweetest person, very, very generous person. And she was going through some very tumultuous personal relationships with her spouse. They were separating and she basically ended up quitting her job and told the dentist during the exit interview that she had quit because she had pretty much concocted this fantasy that they should be together. And he had no idea. The other one that I was talking to probably about a couple years ago at this point, it was a dentist who had been the associate and bought the practice. And so you're moving from a coworker relationship to a leadership relationship, which is definitely a dynamic shift. And he was male dentist. It was female assistant and same thing, trouble with the relationship at home. It's always something like that, right?
Yeah.
Trouble with the relationship at home. And he had been getting some text messages from her that she'd been doing some flirty conversations and other things too, but he'd be getting text messages from her of her in a sexy top or something. And then she would come and complain to him that her husband was searching through her phone and found those messages. And now he's mad at her. And he's like, I don't know what to do. I don't respond to them. I don't engage with it. And I'm like, you need to shut it down. You're now her boss. This is a huge sexual harassment suit risk. Oh my goodness. Not answering it is not sufficient in those cases.
Yeah, that's kind of again, going back to stereotyping men, I feel like that's something sometimes guys will do. Because you're in a situation, right? I haven't had that situation happen personally. But I feel like in your head, you're like, oh God, I am screwed no matter what. Because if I bring it up, now my spouse or wife is going to be like, well, what did you do to get her to want to even text that? What did you say, right? And I'm like, fuck, now I'm in trouble, right? Even if I didn't do anything. And then if you don't say anything, you're like, well, maybe this can just pass by. But then if anything ever happens, then your spouse is like, how long have you known about this and you didn't share it? So you're in a situation where you're like, God damn it, I can't win there's no winning for that person. I feel bad for that dentist right now. Because if he didn't do anything, it's either going to be... Yeah, it sucks.
Transparency is probably the best policy in this case. And in the other one that I had mentioned, I had said the same thing, that that dentist was also married and was concerned that this person was going to continue emailing or calling or something. And so he wasn't sure if he wanted to tell his wife. This is around a holiday. I'm like, look, I know you don't want to, but you really do need to look at these emails, make sure it's not something crazy like I'm sitting outside your door waiting to have holiday dinner with you. Make sure you tell your wife so this doesn't turn into some kind of hand that rocks the cradle situation. I must be getting old because I can make references to movies that were prior to 2000. And
I have an assistant who's younger, and her and I always joke because she's in like early 20s, and she'll reference like American Pie and be like, oh, that's an OG classic. And I'm like, that came out when I was like in high school. Like, stop saying that. And so we joke about it, and it's kind of funny. And I was like, oh yeah, I was an adult when that came out, and that you call it a classic.
Like, I was at a jazz club like a year or two ago, and before 9:00 they were playing like the cool music that our generation knows is the cool music. And then after that, they had an intermission, and then it seemed like the demographic kind of shifted, and there were definitely some younger people there. And the lead singer gets on stage, and he's like, all right, guys, we're going to do a throwback. And I cannot remember the song, but it was from 2013. I'm like, that's not a throwback. Oh my gosh, why is 2013 a
You're
throwback?
Like, I had children in 2013.
That's funny.
Yeah. Anyway.
That's funny. Okay, sorry, I derailed us. Go back to your
Oh no, I mean that was really it. Like, it was more of the conversation of you need to go ahead and let your spouse know this so that it doesn't turn into a situation where they're completely caught off guard, and this crazy person who's obsessed with you apparently is like shows up at your house or does something worse. Like, people have lost it nowadays to some extent. There's a lot that goes on and a lot of what ifs, and I don't mean to do this to scare you. I'm not trying to fearmonger here. I'm trying to make sure that you're prepared, and that's one of the things that I do as HR is like, what is the absolute worst possible scenario here based on what I have heard or seen or that people just do in general, and I want to make sure that you and your family is safe just in case somebody, like with the employee that you let go, what if she hadn't messaged back and apologized and tried to get her job back? What if instead she decided to go on some kind of a rampage? I actually had a practice early last year, that the doctor had bought it, and about 6 months in, she had to terminate the office manager. The office manager had effectively been committing insurance fraud on behalf of the practice. She was waiving patient portion of things. Apparently, they found out after the fact she was writing checks back to patients somehow. A lot of like things going on that very much she needed to be terminated for at a minimum. She didn't want to do it though because the employee was pregnant, and they're in a state that has a Pregnancy Protection Act that had required paid pregnancy leave within the last year. Like, it was, I believe last year was the first year that they did it. And so it was going to be a more heavily scrutinized issue if you let go of a pregnant person. And that's still not a reason to keep somebody if they're doing something at that level. Like, you can't say, well, I'm going to let them go on maternity leave and come back and either hope they don't come back, or I'll come back and find a way to let them go, 6 months later. That can still be seen as discrimination against somebody who is pregnant because they took the time and because they took that leave. And so you really do want to work with an attorney. It was one that I connected her with, an attorney in her area who helped her actually conduct that termination. But the employee, whenever she left, because she had been terminated for what she had been terminated for, she didn't get her unemployment. She wasn't able to apply for the disability that the state that offered at that time. And she was upset, and she was sitting home, and she, I guess was bored or something, and ended up with her family members and her friends writing all of these negative reviews, calling the practice and harassing the administrative team members, coming into the practice and harassing the administrative team members. Just this whole campaign based on her vendetta over being terminated over something that anybody would have obviously terminated for. This wasn't like a difference of opinion or conflicting personalities. It's literally like, you were doing something you shouldn't have been doing. Period. Of course, we were going to terminate you over this. And so there can certainly be situations where employees come back and do these just absolutely mind-blowing, crazy things because they're upset. They are desperate sometimes. Sometimes desperation and stupidity are a bad combination. I'm sure you've seen it with patients. We definitely see it in HR. And so they're desperate. They don't have income. They've got a family situation that, that's putting them on edge, and they will take actions that are not rational and not something you would generally expect. But you want to make sure that you're prepared just in case that happens, and have some kind of a plan for dealing with those situations, because they do happen, and they do occasionally happen in dentistry.
Yeah, I think that someone that you had terminated before.
What? I have another
called.
bad story?
No, I think they like call and like harass the person at the front. They like made like prank phone calls to you guys. Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
That happened? I mean, I can play along and pretend.
No,
like
I'm pretty sure they did. And they were like, who is this person? They were like, just saying bad things about that person specifically. So there was that. But I've also gotten the phone call from you on like, Friday, you do terminate someone. at the end of the week. So good for not doing it at the end of the week, but you're like,
well,
this
person
person's
most convenient.
Yeah. Let me just get this done at the end of the week.
Yeah.
But
it's not a compliance, it's just a best practices.
Yeah.
It makes
You're
sense
right.
because you're like, shit, this person's gonna like throw a rock through the window on the weekend. And
I would be stressed. Oh
Yeah.
Yeah, I was stressed. It was with an employee that it was more of like a stealing money issue. And I was more like, I would always stress about it. And I was like, I'm going to come in on Monday morning and like a window's going to be broken. Like, this is not going to be fun.
Yeah. And then like forgetting to like collect keys.
Oh, yeah. I've had to like change locks like right away. Because like, you're going through and you're like...
Like the easiest thing in the world.
I know.
Get a
yeah.
pin pad so that you can pull the code. Get a pin pad. Everybody have their unique code so that if somebody needs to have theirs changed for whatever reason, an unauthorized individual saw them input it, they leave, whatever, you can easily change the code and it doesn't cost you any extra money.
That's a good one.
Probably.
Yeah, but me being like an anxiety-driven person, I'd be like, then someone's just gonna try to hack it, right? And they're gonna put the little sensor over to see like which fingerprints are on which buttons here, and they're gonna be like, I know it's a combination of like 1, 7, 3, and 4 or whatever, right? And I'm gonna mess with it. Well, that's just where my brain goes.
People pick manual locks too, right?
Yeah, I know. We just watched a show where someone picked one, and you could watch like a YouTube video on it, right? And
yeah.
It was like, you do this.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
No.
And I mean, people who want to break in are going to break in regardless. Like you said, they'll throw a rock through a window. They'll break in regardless. They'll get what they want to get.
Yeah.
But that's where having a security system, having cameras, having ways to protect your practice that are not reliant on hoping that you remember to collect that person's key helps keep you safer in the long run.
Yeah. Well, that goes back to like systems, right? And like, I'm not as good with systems. Alex is definitely more the systems person. So she probably had a checklist of like X, Y, and Z things, like sign off on this before you let this person go. And then I'm probably just more in the moment. I'm like, I just want this person to leave, right? And then in your head, you're like, did I do everything? It's like, do I have my, wallet, phone, keys, right? And that was the one I would forget sometimes is keys. Cause I'd be like, did she have a set of keys or not? I don't really want to talk to her anymore. Cause like we're past like this point and it's just going to be awkward. So I'm just going to let them leave and they seem stressed.
It's easier just to change the locks.
Yeah. But yeah. No, that stuff is fun. I feel like we could talk like for hours about this kind of stuff. So next time I come up with, or I have some more stories, please come back on. Also, even if we hear, I'm sure I'll hear some stuff in the Facebook groups when I'm trolling around in there too.
Or if any of your listeners have stories and they want to email them into you or reach out to you in some way, I'm happy to come and do an Ask the Expert HR spotlight of what would you do in this situation.
Yeah.
That sounds fun.
Awesome. Well, thanks for coming on. We appreciate it. And yeah, thanks.
Thank you for having me. It was a blast.